Welcome to Construction Genius. Have you ever been hacked? Have you ever been held for ransom by cyber criminals? Have they stolen your data, stolen your money, stolen your time, given you stress? Even if this has never happened to you, don't fool yourself and think that it can't happen. And that's why I'm very, very excited to have my guest today, Nick Espinosa. He is the chief security fanatic at Security Fanatics. Security Fanatics is a company that is dedicated to designing custom cyber defense strategies for medium to enterprise corporations. And that is what we talk about here today, cyber defense strategies. You need to have a multi-pronged perspective and approach to defending your company against the multitude of cyber threats that your business is facing every day, whether you realize it or not. And in our discussion today, we take a deep dive into those strategies, into the defensive technology that you need in your organization, into the importance of confidentiality, integrity, and availability as it pertains to your data, how to cordon off certain aspects of your business from one another, create silos in your business without hindering the flow of data and communication, and how you need to take a long-term strategic approach and never settle for the latest and greatest cyber technology security gimmick because things are always changing. I'm pretty fired up about this. The conversation we had was tremendous. You're really going to enjoy it. Nick is an expert. He's tremendously engaging. I promise you, you will not be bored by this conversation about security when it comes to all things cyber. It is essential for you to listen to this episode. Thank you for doing so. Feel free to share it with other people. And thank you, as always, for listening to Construction Genius. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Nick, welcome to Construction Genius.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. I'm having you on because you are a cybersecurity expert. One of my clients a couple of years ago got nailed by a massive attack that took him down for at least a couple of months. It was devastating. So I wanted to bring you on and just right off the bat ask you, why are construction companies particularly so targeted by cyber terrorists?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, number one. And unfortunately, your client is the number one call we get. Oh my God, help, the world is burning down. Unfortunately, though, the number two call is, I don't want to be that guy. So what do I have to do? And construction is targeted pretty heavily for a couple of different reasons. One, basically, there is a perception out there, especially among criminals, that construction firms are always on deadlines. They've got cash on hand. And so statistically, construction will pay a lot faster than other verticals because you want to meet those deadlines for your GC or the project or whatever it is. The other flip side to that is essentially that we see a certain level of complacency in construction firms, meaning you are excellent at building or maintaining or installing whatever you install, or et cetera, et cetera. But one of those key competencies and core competencies is cybersecurity and technology that runs the business. And oftentimes what we see are networks that are based on 20, 30-year-old infrastructure technology and design, not to mention complacency in things like threat detection systems that make it much more easier for cyber criminals or even professional hackers like myself testing systems to evade and get around. So it's a problem coming and going right now in the construction industry.
At what point do you see construction companies hiring internally someone specifically focused on handling these kinds of issues?
Honestly, it really depends on the size of the organization. And that's not unique to construction. That's simply maturity of the organization. As a company grows, maybe you're starting, you're 20 people, you're 30 people, you tend to outsource a lot of these things, whether it's HR or IT support. And for the record, IT is not cybersecurity. They're two different things. But the IT guy is expected to know absolutely everything. Oh, sure, I can install your server, defend it, rotate your tires, fix your VCR, et cetera, et cetera. And so as organizations grow, they realize in order to have good internal controls, smooth processes, they start to look at hiring internal teams, not just for IT or cybersecurity, but for business development as well. And so the larger organizations tend to be more robust, more streamlined. But one of the issues we see as companies are going through that growth from small to mid-size and mid-size to just below enterprise is they tend to not really recognize and understand the need for infrastructure technology that's beyond standard IT, moving to threat detection, meaning they are looking at IT departments as one giant pit of money that they're just throwing cash into when they don't understand that IT and the technology is actually the engine of their economy. It runs the business. Take away the computers, take away the systems. You can't bill anybody. You can't coordinate on projects. You can't communicate with your foreman or your GC or anything else. This actually literally runs the business. It's a total work stoppage without it. And so it's not this giant money pit that you're burning cash into. It is essential to running a construction company, just like any other company out there.
Okay, so that's really good because I'm a construction company owner. I've got my IT guy or gal, and I'm thinking the geeks in the house, and so therefore they're taking care of everything. Right. For a smaller to mid-sized construction company, what are the things that they are missing that typically cause one of these cyber attacks to take them down? What are they missing?
Sure. Well, it's the perception that basically like an outsourced IT company is a one size fits all. Overwhelmingly, and it's one of the biggest problems we have in cybersecurity is that IT companies will put out a shingle saying, oh, yes, we are cybersecurity, when in fact, what they typically do is data security, which is a subset of cybersecurity. And they usually do it at a low to mid-range level. So I'll give you an example of this. So perfect example is simply a cybersecurity framework is 22 categories. It's everything from asset management to data security to contingency planning to how you detect anomalies and events, how you protect your systems that protect you, and on and on and on and on, not to mention risk, an understanding and quantification of risk. And your IT company comes in and says, oh, we've got a firewall, we've got an antivirus, we've got a good backup for you, and then that's it. When those are table stake things, but by no means holistic to defending the organization. So that, I think, is one of the biggest misses that we see is this reliance on oftentimes IT companies that are ill-equipped to really keep up with the evolving technology. IT companies, like many organizations out there, tend to be complacent, and that is the death knell of cybersecurity. We vet our products here every 90 days because we never know when that 15-year-old kid is going to break Google, and we have to slam on the brakes and figure out what on earth that he just did or she just did, and now devise a new strategy for defense. So you're using the same firewall you've used for the last 5-10 years because that's what your IT company is telling you to do, and we've outclassed it for the last 3. And that is a huge problem that we see just all over the world.
Okay, so this is really great. You've talked about the table stakes. What are the areas beyond the table stakes that a construction company immediately needs to take initiative on when it comes to cybersecurity?
Yeah, so the first thing that any organization needs to do, especially construction, is to understand your risk. Cybersecurity, at the end of the day, is a quantification and understanding of risk and then the mitigation thereof. If you cannot tell me as an organization how many computers are off or can be off for how long until it's so economically unviable for your company, torches and pitchforks at the CEO's door, then how do you know what you're doing is right? How do you know the backup is right? Maybe production can be down for 6 hours and it's so economically unviable after that. Maybe marketing can be down for a week and nobody cares.
Right.
If you cannot tell me these things, how do you know your backups are good? How do you know your recovery times are good? How do you know your threat detections are robust enough to mitigate that, to ensure that you won't go down for longer than X amount of time? If you cannot quantify that in hard and soft dollars, that's a huge problem. Therefore, the very first thing to really getting down the cybersecurity road is to run a risk assessment to the organization. Understand your strengths and weaknesses, understand the value of your information, and then understand that if you lose access to that value or that information is stolen and put out there into the dark web, what is that going to do to your bottom line? And we can see examples from the construction world exactly on this. I mean, you look at the massive Target breach from around a decade ago, 8 years ago, something like that. It was actually a mechanical contractor that was involved in that. It was a shared responsibility between Target and that mechanical contractor. But I guarantee you, when Target came out and declared a data breach, they threw that mechanical contractor under every bus on the bus schedule that week. Yep. And guess what happens with that mechanical contractor when they go to the Walmart next door or the Home Depot next door to say, hey, we can do your HVAC. And Walmart and Home Depot say, aren't you the ones that got Target breached? These are things that we have to quantify. These are things that we have to understand. And if we don't get that, if we don't really fully integrate that into our business process for management, we are going to end up with a very serious problem on our hands. We really are.
So that's interesting because a lot of times we think of our company as, and let me put my wall around my company.
Sure.
But in these matters of cybersecurity, it not only affects me, but it affects my clients, it affects my project partners. As you do an assessment like that you're describing with a contractor, what are the biggest weaknesses that you see on a consistent basis?
So some of the biggest weaknesses are, one, no real understanding of the indemnification of the organization against its employees. Meaning we have employees that are allowed to do essentially whatever they want to do because they've not been given good guidelines. So, for example, you might have that construction foreman, or you might have that accounting person or whatever that says, I really want to work from home. They bring in a flash drive or they install Dropbox onto their computer and they start transferring a whole bunch of your proprietary information to home to legitimately work. But God knows what Junior is doing on that computer at 2 a.m. Or maybe you have to fire that person and they are walking away with a ton of your information. Understand that while you respect your employees, you want your employees to thrive, you're going to train your employees, et cetera, you also have to train them on good cyber hygiene, but you as an organization have to get control of that as well. That is one of the biggest problems that we have. On top of that, like I said, oftentimes we're seeing antiquated technology, even if it's brand new, because the technology that is being supplied to the construction companies through their third-party IT providers oftentimes is low to mid-range. I literally just finished a cybersecurity assessment for a construction company in Michigan, and that's exactly what we found. They had a firewall that was brand new, fully licensed, and I could teach a third-grade class how to download infections through that firewall that the firewall never missed. I was able to infect that network innocuously, but I was able to infect that network without tripping any of their systems. And this is what we're talking about. We are continuously evolving these things. The other big thing that we see is that we see no real robust contingency planning in organizations. People say, oh, I have a backup disaster recovery plan that looks great on paper, but it's never been tested. But a contingency plan includes that. It includes an understanding of the different types of threats to the organization. Maybe somebody walks away with your data. Maybe you do get a ransomware event. Maybe a tornado or an earthquake or a fire or whatever rips through your building. Now what? If you don't have these things on paper, what ends up happening is you slow down in your reaction time. And we've walked into organizations. We had a large architectural firm that we were working with last year. They had a massive ransomware event, no real contingency planning, and we had to figure out on the fly the priorities of stuff. Does email come up first? Does the database come up first? Does communication in some other way with, let's say, the customers come up first? They had to figure this out on the fly, not understanding, okay, email can be down for 2 hours and then we're going to lose money, or the production platform we all share is more vital. They couldn't answer these things. So having an understanding of that is one of the most important things any organization is going to do, because it's going to help you recover faster and effectively, and everybody's going to know what to do, as opposed to you've got 30 executives calling like the IT staff saying, are we up? Are we up? Are we up? Can we get up now? Is email up? And all you're doing is slowing down their response time as well. That's a huge issue. So those are the big ones that we see almost right out of the gate universally in construction.
Okay, so I got those three there and if I missed one, let me know. I've got employees, I've got antiquated technology, and then lack of contingency planning.
Yes.
So
yes,
let me go back up to employees then. So I've got my kick-ass project executive or superintendent, and they're working out of their house. What are the lines that I need to draw to be able to do my very best to protect my data and to avoid what you just said, Johnny on the computer bringing in something from the dark web or whatever and hit my system? What lines should I draw there?
Right. So as we approach cybersecurity or cyber defense for an organization, there is a large umbrella that we use. It's called the triad. It's known as the CIA. And I am not talking about those that spy on us.
I like this. We got triad, we got CIA. This is beautiful. Let's go for it.
There you go. There you go. In cybersecurity nerd speak, the CIA is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. How do we assure the confidentiality of the data so that if it's stolen, it's not going to get dumped out into the dark web, you're not going to get ransomed? How do we ensure integrity, meaning it's not being altered maliciously, it's not getting destroyed on you, that it's there and it's consistent, meaning you can always log into that database and work, it's not going to get corrupted? And availability is uptime. How are we assuring that you are basically going to have access to that data while it is both confidential, secure, and has integrity, that you can get it 24/7 if you've got a job site that's running 24/7. Those are the three pillars. Now, we apply that through safeguards or controls. And the big three on the controls are, we have administrative controls. These are the paperwork side, the management side, the training side of these things, meaning how are we training our people, that accountant that shouldn't be going home with files? How are we training him or her? These are things that we are talking about. And that training is role-based because how you train the janitor should be different than how you train the assistant to the CEO. They have different access. Therefore, they need to be trained differently. Now, on top of administrative controls, we have physical controls, meaning can I just walk into your office right now, undetected, pick up a computer and walk out? Do you have cameras? Do you have barriers to prevent things? Do you have a server room that is under lock and key? Is your sensitive data locked up? These kinds of things are so unbelievably important. Do you have a log of people coming and going out of your office so you know who potentially is there? Now, you have administrative, you have physical, and then there's the technical safeguards. Do you have encryption? Do you have threat detection systems? Do you have good logging to understand who is logging in and accessing what and why? Therefore, in the event of some kind of attack or in the event of a loss of data, we can go back forensically in the logs and say, oh yeah, it was Bill in accounting that took everything and said, screw this place and walked out the door to the competitor, because we've seen that too. So those are the core things that we are looking at when we are approaching cybersecurity.
It's very interesting because as you go through those things, when you said integrity, I immediately thought of the integrity of the person, but you're talking about the integrity of the information.
The goal of the CIA follows the data.
Right.
It follows the data. It protects the data. The data is what we are doing. And by virtue of that, we train our people. The number one thing that I talk about when I say I'm building you a cyber defense strategy is awareness training. Because if I am building you a Ferrari's worth of a cyber defense strategy and I'm turning the keys to that Ferrari over to a chimpanzee, how far are we going to get?
Yep.
We have to learn how to drive. We have to learn how to protect ourselves and each other. That is the number one thing.
Okay, so we got the triad is confidentiality, integrity, availability, and then the safeguards are administrative control, physical control, and then the technical safeguards.
That is correct.
So I can already see the brains of the construction leaders listening to this podcast beginning to sort of almost explode. And I'm going to get to how you can go through this process a little later. But I want to go to the second aspect of the antiquated technology. What is, in your mind, your opinion, the one piece of technology that is totally overrated and gets pushed way too much into construction companies that they really don't need to focus on? And what is the alternative to that?
So in terms of technology that they shouldn't be focusing on, when it comes to defensive technology,
yes,
honestly, there's really no defensive technology that shouldn't be applied. And what I mean by that is we tend to layer our security. There is no one size fits all, meaning, well, I have a firewall, so I don't need an antivirus. You know what I mean? Oh, I've got identity management, so I don't need a firewall. Or I've got antivirus, I don't need a firewall. The goal of a good cyber defense strategy is to layer essentially defensive technologies as to build perimeters around the user, remove needless choices from the user, meaning should they really need to go to control panel to change things or uninstall things, and then train them appropriately in this. Now, if you're talking about antiquated technology versus, let's say, replacements and evolution, traditional antivirus would probably be my answer for that. And the reason being is if you're looking at like the Nortons and the Semantics and the Webroots and the McAfees of the world, that is all antiquated technology. We are now moving towards artificial intelligence-based endpoint detection response, managed detection response, and we're essentially leveraging things like machine or deep learning so that the endpoint detection response understands unusual behavior. That is something that is vastly outclassing traditional, what is known as signature-based antivirus, and we just don't use it anymore. Right? It's so easy to evade. I actually wrote an article back in 2016 on how easy it is to evade called I Love Ransomware for a previous publisher of mine. And the reason why I love ransomware is because it underscores that perception of, well, I've got my $20 Norton on my computer. Now I'm Fort Knox, when it's anything but. So these are things that I think are really missed right now. So when we see traditional antivirus, as I literally just mentioned, we just did one out of Michigan, it's so easy to get infections around that stuff. It really is.
So I like this idea of the layering of technology. I know you've touched on this already, Nick, but give us the essential layers that every construction company should have in their organization.
Sure. So think about the perimeters that you have to build. If you're looking at the military, right? If you're building a base in the middle of a war zone, you're digging trenches, you're putting up wire, you're building a perimeter to protect basically the horde of your enemy from just running into camp and killing everybody.
Yeah.
It's the same concept here in cybersecurity as it is in physical security. So in cybersecurity, as we are looking at perimeters, we have a perimeter around the user, we have perimeters around data, and we have perimeters around the flow of data. So for example, think about all the ways that you interact, communicate, or use technology in your business. One of the core ways, as an example, is email. So you might have Office 365 because every freaking business has Office 365 at this point. And so you can build a perimeter around Office 365 by using a third-party spam filter as opposed to the integrated Microsoft one, which isn't that good. And so what happens is now all of your email goes to this perimeter. It gets checked for threat. And if it's good, it passes into your ecosystem. And now you've got a perimeter taking the hits. If you've got a physical building with wiring and cables and wireless and all of that, you've got a firewall basically that sits between the internet and your office so that everything that goes out and everything comes in gets checked for threat completely. And then inside the network as well, we start building what are called micro perimeters for an approach we call zero trust. And so essentially, think about it this way. Let's say, and we'll use easy numbers, you have 100 people in your building. The traditional network is you've got a firewall, and then you've got 100 computers and printers and VoIP and all this stuff, and it's one big happy family. But why do the accounting computers need to, on a network, talk to the marketing computers that talk to the sales computers that can also talk to the production computers and on and on? Why not wall them off? The problem with the standard traditional perimeter-based network with a single firewall is if I'm able to infect one computer in accounting, I can infect all 99 other computers in the network. But if I silo accounting, I silo marketing, I silo sales, when there's an outbreak in marketing, it stays in marketing. And now we're protecting the company, we're protecting data. So building perimeters inside are also super important. It's like the old castles of yore. You had a moat, then you had an outer wall, you had space and an inner wall. This is what we're talking about. Compartmentalization and segmentation of this is one of those things. And then on top of it, you've got the total backup for threat defense, which is the endpoint detection response. So if something gets through the perimeter, something gets into that small perimeter because somebody downloaded something and everything missed it, then you've got the endpoint detection response that works as a remediation tool. If it senses a threat, it can then cut off all the other marketing computers. So your 10 marketing computers, only one's infected. The other 9 are now excised from that. So this is essentially the approach that we are taking. On top of this, we have a perimeter around the identity of the user as well. One of the big pushes that we have in cybersecurity is identity management. We have so many stolen usernames and passwords that are getting companies hit. Colonial Pipeline is a perfect example of this. Stolen username and password, logged into the VPN, knocked out the billing system for Colonial Pipeline, and here we are, national panic, right? So building an identity management solution based on artificial intelligence that realizes, hey, wait a second, Nick's not in Moscow or shouldn't be in Moscow at 3 a.m. logging in at 3,000 times a second. Something must be wrong. And then suddenly I'm in Beijing trying to log in 3,000 times a second. Well, I don't have a Star Trek transporter. Now it understands geovelocity.
Right.
And so my identity, for example, on the platform that we leverage here, my platform only works in Illinois. I'm in Chicago. And when I fly next week to Washington, D.C., it'll work in DC and it will stop working in Illinois and on and on. Now I'm mitigating that threat that is essentially there. So if one of my people at my office steals my username, tries to log in as me in Chicago, they can't. My login doesn't work in Chicago anymore. This is what we're talking about. These are the things that we can approach and we can put in. And this doesn't slow the user down. This doesn't impede the user. These are natural things that we can put in that are simply there to defend the user. And when all else fails, when all the technology fails, we have to rely on the training that the person can actually follow protocol and spot that phishing email or request verification when somebody says, hey, we have a new bank account. Here's the new number. Please send our money here. Those are things that we really need to discuss. We really need to understand, I should say.
So I was going to ask you that question because we're doing walls within walls. We've got walls around computers, walls around users, walls around departments, walls around the company. The logic makes complete sense. But then the question is, well, what about that flow of data? What about communication? How is that flow of data and communication that is necessary for the execution of the business? How is that affected by all of these walls that you're describing?
So a good cyber defense strategy really doesn't affect the user. With the exception of possibly having to punch in a code for multi-factor authentication, you don't see this. It's simply there and it's simply running in the background. So, for example, with a good identity management solution, we are creating what's called a software-defined perimeter or black cloud. So let's say I'm logging in to pick a major construction platform out there. I'm not advertising for Autodesk or Procore or one of those, but pick one of those that you're logging into, okay? Or any one of them, doesn't matter. If I have a good identity management platform, I have multiple things going on when I log in. So I'm on my phone, I'm on my device. The device one is recognized because of the unique hardware cryptographic signatures that are just automatically in every device. Your phone has a different one than everybody else's on the planet, as does mine. So it's understanding that. It's understanding automatically my geolocation. Oh, I'm in Illinois. I'm supposed to be in Illinois. Great. I'm not in Beijing, right? I'm not in Moscow. It's understanding a biometric. Maybe I'm using a thumbprint or Face ID. Then I've got a password and I know my password, right? All of these things have to basically combine to basically be checks to then allow me into the system. Long gone are the days of just a username and password and a VPN getting you in. We are outclassing those kinds of technologies using the cloud, using all of the artificial intelligence that we have. There's probably 7 or 8 different checks every time I log in to get access to any of my data. And the only thing I see is my password that I punch in. Everything else is automatically there because of the hardware that I own. So if my phone is ever cloned, it won't work because my hardware is not with the clone. If somebody steals my username and password, it won't work because everything else that makes me who I am with my technology, my biometrics, doesn't go with that username and password. This is where we're at. And this is what we don't see in construction overwhelmingly, except at the largest companies. And now this is trickled down from enterprise and is affordable for pretty much everybody from small to mid-size. That's not always the case. It's the same with like a Mercedes. You can buy a $200,000 Mercedes with every security bell and whistle ever. And in 5 years, that $20,000 Ford Taurus will have all of it.
Yes.
We're at the Ford Taurus level. You know what I'm saying? We're at the Ford Taurus level with the Mercedes defenses. It's just nobody understands this. And the IT companies are not applying these because they're not keeping up with enterprise security. And so this is the ever evolving situation that we perpetually have when we're dealing with construction organizations and also other verticals as well.
Okay, so you brought up this idea of the phishing emails, and we all know the story. You know, someone from some random country sends me the email. So if you were doing, Nick, if you were doing a quick 30-minute course on phishing emails, and you were saying these are the types of emails that you need to be looking out for, the subject lines or the content, what are those like top 3 phishing emails that are going to come in and they're just going to knock me over easily?
Right. So the ones that we are typically worried about are the ones that are more sophisticated. Like everybody sees, okay, no Prince Ubuntu from Nigeria doesn't need help with his revolution. You know what I mean? Like very few people fall for those anymore. You know, and I stopped supporting my last prince about 3 years ago anyway.
Yeah,
But the ones that we see are typically in the vein of 2 different types. One is business email compromise scams. And so as an example, I could have a financial advisor, somebody hacks into my mailbox, takes it over, spoofs my financial advisor, and basically creates rules in my Office 365 because I did not lock my Office 365 down. We see that all the time too. So now my actual financial advisor is blocked and I'm getting emails from my fake financial advisor that knows everything. Signatures match. Oh, how are your kids? You know, like, oh, my dog Fluffy is doing well. You know, whatever those details are from that conversation. Oh, by the way, move money from this account, move money from that account. We're opening up a new account here. And we see those perpetually move. And we've seen organizations be taken for millions until they catch these things. So understanding that you have to put good protocols in place for those things is super, super important in the sense that, okay, if there are going to be transactions, there have to be multiple checks. Or if I'm moving X amount of dollars, I have to pick up a phone and actually talk to the financial advisor because I know him or her personally. Those are things that we look at. The other big side of this is essentially things like spear phishing or whale hunting, meaning somebody is spoofing C-level executives and then getting the underlings to do the jump. So I'll give you a perfect example of this. It actually happened in our own organization 5-6 years ago. I'm running through O'Hare Airport, and one of the companies that I own, I happen to be the CIO of, and I get an email from the president of that company that says, hey, I need you to do a wire transfer for me real quick. And I had to smile because, one, I have no idea how the hell to do a wire transfer. I'm not an accounting guy. You know what I mean? I'm the cybersecurity nerd. And it said, hey, thanks, Scott. And basically, if you're thinking, oh my God, well, the president of the company was hacked, the answer is no. Somebody went onto that website's page, saw basically my mugshot next to him in the executive leadership, like who we are. And now they have a roadmap to say, oh, I'll spoof the president to hit the CIO, or I'll spoof the president to hit the VP, or whatever it is, because a CIO or a CISO has the ability to move money, maybe. Those are the things that we are talking about. Those happen on the personal side when people get into mailboxes and then have the address book of the entire family and then start emailing the family as Johnny that got ripped off in backpacking in London. Please send money to London. But we see it in business all the time. And we get called in a lot of times when people have fallen for these and, okay, what do we do? And so that's a huge thing. And then obviously spotting the fakes. You can put checks into like 365. So if it's an external sender, you can have a big old banner that says this is an external sender. So if your CEO is sending you an email saying move money and there's a huge banner that says external sender, well, that guy or girl is not going to be an external sender, right? They're going to be inside the organization. And so that's something that we can do as controls. So not to mention spam filtering, which cuts down on like 90% of this more or plus, but it's a huge problem overall.
Okay, so it's interesting because you're talking about these particular scams where there's sort of funds being funneled out of the business. And I'm assuming if the criminals are smart, maybe the amounts aren't so significant that you're getting them right away.
They're relative to the size of the business.
Right. But then there's the gun to the head situation, right? Where they've locked down, they're holding you for ransom. Is that still happening a lot now?
Yes. So I'll give you this stat.
Yeah.
From 2017 to the end of 2021, meaning the beginning of 2022, the estimate in 2017 was that we, you, me, governments, the entire world will have spent $1 trillion collectively on cyber defense. Everybody from grandma in Idaho up to the US government will have spent that money. Conversely, the hackers will have extracted over $6 trillion from us in the single largest wealth transfer in history, and they exceeded that number by about 6 months. So understand this is massive, massive business for these hackers, these criminal hackers, I should say, all over the place. And so the two biggest things that we see that are sucking money out of businesses is number one by far is business email compromise schemes.
Right.
When they are actually able to get you to wire and transfer money because you're not usually doing it once, you're doing it consistently because you think you're talking to a legit person, or you, for the last 3 months, you've been sending payments to your vendor at the wrong place. And now the vendor's like, why the hell haven't you paid us? The other side of that is the ransomware, which is number two in extracting money as well. And they have been ramping that up for years. We are up to the point of quadruple extortion is what we are seeing now in the ransomware gangs. And they're making huge money. Our Evil at its height was making about 100 million. Conti's making about the same as well. So these are massive amounts of money that they're just sucking out of everybody. It's absolutely huge.
Is there ever a time when you don't pay the ransom?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. We had one of these. Actually, I'll give you a construction story. We had a construction firm in Silicon Valley, around Silicon Valley, that got hit around Christmas of last year by one of these gangs. And so we immediately go to work excising the virus, et cetera, trying to get them stabilized with their IT teams, replacing antiquated technology as fast as we can. But we also got into negotiations with ransom. And so one of the things, and for the record, all ransoms are negotiable. So when they come with this huge $1 million thing, you can usually knock them down to something, because then we wheel and deal all the time. But the goal is to understand exactly what they took, not just what they locked out. So for example, they might have been caught halfway through. They might have gotten innocuous folders that nobody cares about. Why bother with that? You're not violating any compliances or anything along those lines. So why on earth would you pay to get pointless data back, right? The other side of it is some organizations, and our default recommendation is not to pay, but sometimes you have to because it could be a life-ending event for the organization. But like I said, the one that we had in Silicon Valley, we were able to say, okay, we don't want the file. Obviously, we want the files back, but like we just want to see a list of what you have because, and I'm playing dumb, like, hey, I'm just this old construction guy. I don't know what I'm doing. It took me forever to find the dark web, blah, blah, blah. Just totally stringing them along for like a month or two while the IT teams and us are locking everything down so they can't get back in. And basically, they gave us a listing of the files, and the CEO of the company is like, I'm not paying for this. This is absolutely pointless. So we just strung them along, just trying to lower the ransom down until we just cut them off. And then the war in Ukraine started, and he said, well, I'm not paying Russians no matter what. You know what I mean? So he wasn't going to pay anyway. But that's what we do. We string them along. And a lot of organizations don't realize, but if you've been hit with ransomware once, statistically, you have an 80% chance of getting hit again the next year. You get hit constantly because what happens is you excise the virus, everything goes back to normal, and then you don't fix anything. You don't upgrade anything. It's just business as usual. And the same vulnerabilities you had before are the same vulnerabilities they'll exploit again or somebody else will find. So it's a huge issue as well. Complacency is just the killer in cybersecurity. It really is.
So tell me then about the importance of the senior leadership in executing an effective cyber strategy for a construction business.
Yes. So, and this is one of the biggest problems we have in all verticals, construction as well, because usually the CEOs and the CFOs of the world are not technical when it comes to actual nerd things like IT, cybersecurity, et cetera. So this is usually how I coach CISOs, chief information security officers or chief information officers, or when I've got a room full of CEOs, as I will in DC in a couple of days as I'm talking to them, is understand your organization. You have, let's say, a 5-year vision for your company, where it's going to go, how you're going to grow. Your CFO is going to fund it. Your CIO is going to build the infrastructure that runs and maintains the engine of your economy. Because as I said before, the engine of your economy is not the construction work. It's the technology that allows you to properly run the organization to get the construction work done. The CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, is going to defend the whole thing. We are the shield that protects the engine of your economy. And given the importance of what the construction industry is as a whole, it is beyond important to have good cybersecurity. So you have that 5-year vision. Imagine losing half of your clients when they find out that their sensitive information has basically been lost. Does that GC want to work with you again? If you're a GC, does a major US government department or some huge corporation want to work with you again? No. And this is what we are talking about. We are talking about the indemnification of risk. The engine of your economy should be protected at all costs. And if you are not doing that and you are not understanding the risk to this, all it looks like is one, you're going to be complacent, or two, you think you're going to blow money when you're actually not. So understand that. And then obviously get good help on top of this as well. I don't go to my podiatrist for brain surgery, and I don't go to my neurosurgeon for footwork, and I like to walk and think. We train differently. We have different specializations in cybersecurity and IT. I have a whole bunch of IT people. I love them. They're great. They keep the lights on. I can set my watch to them. My cybersecurity people are nuts, but that's what I want. They're looking at creative ways on how to destroy your life so we can figure out how to defend you. These are two different animals. Don't treat them the same and don't assume one can do the other. You will never hire me to fix a printer. I would never take that job, and I would charge you way too much. So we have to understand that there are different roles, in the same way that I understand an electrician is not a plumber. And I'm not going to hire my electrician to start running the plumbing for my toilet.
Yep.
We just don't do that, right? It's the same concept. It really is.
And it's interesting because what you've been describing here, Nick, is that you not only have to have the technology in place, but then you also have to have the right people and have the right people trained in place in order to be able to execute a successful cybersecurity strategy.
Correct. You have to have the right core competencies. You need IT, you need cybersecurity. We are married at the hip, but we are different animals. And when I'm on stage talking to CEOs of IT companies, I give them this example. If you have never sat down with your team and contemplated calling in a bomb threat to one of your clients, then you're not doing cybersecurity, which was an actual conversation I had years ago with a junior cybersecurity hacker. And we were trying to figure out a way, how do we break into this building? And his thought was, well, why don't we just call in a bomb threat? Everybody will leave. We can show up in fireman gear and we can just walk right in and we can steal whatever we want to steal. And my first thought was, my God, that would totally work. And my next thought was, but the cops don't know we're not terrorists.
Yeah.
Not to mention when we all show up in like Subarus and Hondas and fireman gear, we don't have a fire truck. Like, how's that going to work? Like, nobody's going to believe that. But the point is that it's that kind of outside of the box thinking that you want as a good approach to cybersecurity, because we're always looking to try and innovate ahead of the hackers who are always innovating. It's a cat and mouse game, whereas IT is keeping the lights on. And that is so insanely important, but it's just a different animal. It really is.
That's excellent. So as we're wrapping up here, Nick, what would you recommend are the first 2 or 3 steps that a CEO should be taking immediately to evaluate their cybersecurity and then to act on the findings from that evaluation?
Yeah. So first things first, get a cybersecurity risk assessment.
Okay.
Understand in hard and soft dollars, as I mentioned before, how many computers can be off for how long until you are out of business or your data is ruined or you have no reputation. Understand and quantify that data as well. Understand and quantify your current technology, your current defensive standards, your current level of training and awareness, your current policies, procedures, things that indemnify the corporation against the potential malfeasance of an inside employee. These are things that we need to understand. And once you have that, build a plan of action, basically, that really will execute on fixing those holes. No cybersecurity project, I don't care what size you are, should be more than 8 fiscal quarters or 2 years. Ideally, a lot faster than that, because again, we are innovating very quickly in cybersecurity, unlike standard technology in IT. I know the iPhone 14 will be better than the 13 because it has a slightly better camera and a slightly better processor, and the 13 is better than 12 for the same reason. But again, we never know when that 15-year-old kid is going to do something that flips everything upside down, which literally happened in the mid-2000s to Google, Apple, Amazon, and one other company. And a 15-year-old kid, hacker named Cosmo, broke them all in like the matter of weeks. And we had to completely rewrite multi-factor authentication and identity management. It was insane. It was a Mount Everest level hack. It was crazy. So these things happen. And so understand as they evolve new tactics and technologies, you have to have a network and an infrastructure that is keeping up with those defensive technologies as well. So those are the core things that would get anybody down the road.
That's excellent. Excellent. Nick, tell us a little bit more about your company and the work that you do.
Sure. So I am the chief security fanatic of Security Fanatics. We do all things cybersecurity, cyber warfare, cyber terrorism, infrastructure, and government compliance related. And needless to say, we have been busy as hell the last couple of years, just given everything that's going on. But yeah, and we have clients from small to Fortune 100. Some of the interesting projects that we've been involved with or getting involved with are things like building cyber defense strategies for developing countries alongside the United Nations ITU, and then everything else in between.
And how can people get a hold of you and learn more about what you do?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can like, share, follow me on Facebook and Twitter at Nick AESP for as long as Twitter exists. And you can also hit me up on LinkedIn as well, /Nick Espinosa, and come say hi. I'd love to connect.
Awesome. Nick, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you have deep expertise working with construction companies, and so that's why I had you on. And I would really encourage any construction company CEO listening to this program to go out to securityfanatics.com, check them out, and learn more about what they do to help construction companies. So Nick, thank you for coming on. Thank you for being very generous with your insights. And I learned a ton today, and it was super helpful.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Nick. I know you enjoyed it, and it was tremendously helpful. I just know it. And so check out Nick. The links are in the show notes. Go to securityfanatics.com, connect with him on LinkedIn or on Twitter. All those links will be in the show notes. And this episode of Construction Genius has been brought to you by the one book every construction leader must read. What is that book? That book is Construction Genius. And you can go out to constructiongeniusbook.com and grab yourself a copy right away. We have Audible, we have the paperback, we have the hardcover, and we have the Kindle version. And you can get that book and figure out how to solve the people problems that are costing your construction company millions. The book is packed with practical, simple, straightforward, no BS ways for you to be a better leader, for you to be able to maximize the profitability in your organization. So go out to constructiongeniusbook.com, buy the book today, enjoy it, contact me by email, let me know what you think about the book. Give us a good rating or a review on Amazon, an honest rating. I don't mind if it's 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars, whatever the case is. Just go out, get the book. I know it will have a tremendous positive impact on you and your organization. Thank you for listening today.